Have a listen to this. Have a listen to this.
Now, that kind of talk this week dragged Australia's share market to a two-year low. There are, of course, complex reasons for that.
He was the big spender. Right. The big spender.
Doing the grocery shopping could take a huge chunk out of the family budget.
And that's finance.
Hello and welcome to Comedian versus Economist. We demystify the world of money and help you get a handle on the bigger picture. My name's Adam and I'm joined as always by my little older brother and real life economist, Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Yeah, good Adam. Very excited to be here.
Oh, exciting. I tell you what, Thomas, we just ticked over 100,000 total downloads last week. Woohoo. Amazing. So thank you out there so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it and literally couldn't have done it without you. So special thanks to you guys. Special thanks also to the AI robot that I spun up in AWS just to nudge those stats up. I didn't really. It's all you guys. Really appreciate it. Thomas, you blew up social media channels last week with one of your charts. And look, I'm not saying that the charts you normally post are bad. I'm just saying you finally released a good one. So good on you. Amazing chart. If you haven't seen it, head over to CVE Podcast on Facebook or Instagram. But the title of the chart, Thomas, if I could recap for a moment, what animal could you beat in a fight? And it listed men and women's ability to take on different types of animals. It did point out that you had to be unarmed, though, which was an important condition.
It's not ability, it's an opinion. So how do you rate yourself against a house cat or how do you rate yourself against a lion?
Right. There's a list of animals. So right at the top, you've got grizzly bear, which 6% of women and 7% of men said they could beat a grizzly bear unarmed. And right at the other end of the scale, there was a rat. Not very convincing. It's only 68% of women and 76% of men said that they could defeat a rat in unarmed hand-to-hand combat. So there's a lot of people living with rats, if you go by those stats.
Maybe they think it's Splinter.
My favourite animal was the elephant.
Oh, yeah.
So there's an elephant, which is 3 from the top, and only 8% of women and 9% of men said that they could defeat an elephant in unarmed combat, which I reckon, even if you're Conor McGregor, you're not beating an elephant in a fight unarmed. Best case, you won't lose to the elephant because it will ignore you while you're kicking its shins. But no one's taking down an elephant unarmed.
No, it's hard to know what they're thinking there.
Who even wants to attack an elephant unarmed?
Yeah, I know. As if you would.
Scary animals
Little
like
darlings.
Bears and lions and king cobras.
Yeah, crocodile. Like a crocodile's probably attacking you. That's a reasonable thing to be thinking about. How do I take out a crocodile?
Just this docile elephant wandering through the jungle. Oh, I jump on its back, see if I can take it down. So anyway, if you want to go and see the complete list and all the data, it really is worth a look. It's some of your best work, Thomas, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, shout out to the 26% of men who don't think they could beat a house cat in a fight.
CVE Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Go and give us a follow and you'll see that chart. It's a ripper. But Thomas, big week on the show. Lots to digest and get through. This week, the government announced the end of QE2, and I ain't talking about the cruise ship. We're going to check in and see what the government's money printing machine is up to now. End of QE2, starting QE3. I couldn't be more excited. Also, Iceland have trialled moving to a 4-day work week. And believe it or not, they reckon it's amazing, something we should all be doing. There's been some bad news this week if you're investing in China, some big news happening over there. We'll take a look at what's going on in China. But first, Thomas, we called it last week. There's an M&A boom afoot, a mergers and acquisitions boom. We talked about it on the show last week with the takeover of Sydney Airport. And just today, recording today on the 12th of July, Wesfarmers have made an offer to buy API, which is best known for their Priceline pharmacies. Wesfarmers, of course, who own Bunnings, Kmart, Geeks to You, which was going to be the name of this show, actually, but I couldn't infringe. Lots of big brands. Wesfarmers, huge company. So what's going on there? They're taking over API, right? or trying to.
Yeah, they put in a bid, and API have said, so Sydney Airport's last week saying like, no, we don't reckon shareholders should sell, and these guys are saying like, yeah, all right, if you want to buy, go for it. We're not going to get in the way of that. But they are saying it, but if we get a better offer, we're going to take it. So yeah, open to selling, it seems.
Right. There's also the Equity Mates guys are talking mergers and acquisitions this week as well, I think. So head over to their podcast, Equity Mates Investing Podcast. A couple of big stories over there are in the mergers and acquisition space as well.
I think this is going to be the theme for the next 6 months. I think like we're already booming in terms of levels. Like it was like 50% up on normal levels this year so far, and I reckon it's the thin end of the wedge right now. And I think mergers and acquisitions are going to be what it's all about over the next 6 months.
Right.
That's my tip.
That's your tip. That's hard to argue given where we're at. We've seen such big acquisitions going on the last week. So huge. Watch this space. I did mention Wesfarmers owned Bunnings and Kmart. Both of those companies were listed in a Roy Morgan poll this week, Thomas. Mm-hmm. The most trusted brands in Australia. If I could just indulge you for a minute. The top 10, number 1 was Woolworths, number 2 was Coles, number 3 was Bunnings, 4 was Aldi, 5 was Qantas, number 6 was Kmart, number 7 was Apple, number 8 was Toyota, number 9 was the NRMA, and number 10 was the ABC. So the most trusted brands in Australia. What do you make of that?
It seems highly correlated with usage. So it seems like, Woolworths and Coles as 1 and 2, they're the guys you're going to every day of the week. And all of those, they're sort of household names. Like I think if you look at the other end of the spectrum of the least trusted. Well,
yeah, we've got a list of a few of the least trusted brands. So Amazon, Rio Tinto, Huawei, who, if you don't know what Huawei does, they're a Chinese malware manufacturer to the West. No, they make accusations only, unfounded, of course. Crown Resorts, which, I guess if you don't like shady money dealings, then probably you're not into them either. Uber, Twitter and TikTok made up some of the least trusted brands.
Yeah. Interesting.
So there's definitely a flavour to it. I mean, if you look at the most trusted brands, a lot of them are Australian companies. And then if you look at the least trusted brands, and this is in an Australian market, right? This was the poll, wasn't it? So the other ones very much sort of have an international flavour to it, with the exception of Rio Tinto, who's, I guess, arguably digging up Australia. So maybe people prefer buying bread over digging giant holes in the ground. I don't know. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know what trust means in this context anyway. Like, how do you trust? I don't know. You trust that when you buy some milk from Woolies, you're going to get it home and it's not going to be tomato soup inside. What are we talking? Do we know what we're talking about when we say trust in this context?
I don't think so. I think it's just the question is, what brands do you trust? Do you trust this brand? How much do you trust them? I think is it's a sort of, it's subjective to the individual.
I mean, Toyota's, from what I understand, is one of the most reliable car brands. I guess
that's the reputation, isn't it?
It's a reputation. So is it a reputation for being solid? I mean, I wouldn't trust a Toyota Prius to look after my children. But
they are high maintenance, though, to be fair, your kids.
Yeah, true. I need a Tesla.
Yeah.
I need a smart car. If I'm gonna let a car babysit my kids. Well, there you go. I mean, it's a poll, It's different things to different people. But yeah, interesting. Whether COVID's had something to do with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Woolworths and Coles would be very happy with that. It means that people are happy with what they're getting, I think. Like, trust and customership sort of go hand in hand. You buy from brands you trust on any level, even if it's not really important. So, yeah, I think they'd be happy with those results for sure.
All right, moving on. So the RBA came out this week. They've said it's the end of QE2. When we talk about QE, we're talking about quantitative easing, Thomas. Is that right?
There's a word you've got in your lexicon now.
We didn't know that word 6 months ago when we started this podcast. So we're moving from QE2 to QE3. There's been a bit of stuff in the news this week coming out of the RBA about what that means. Maybe if we could just start, for those of us that maybe, those of you out there who are joining us for the first time, maybe you could just start with a recap on what is QE, what does it mean, where are we at, how have we got here, and where are we going?
Yeah, so go back to this sort of when COVID hit markets crashed, everyone started freaking out. The first thing the RBA did was drop interest rates to the floor, went as low as they can go, currently sitting around 0.1%, and that's where they've stayed since then. From that point on, there's nothing more monetary policy can do in the sense of cutting interest rates to stimulate the economy. And so we moved into the next phase after that, once rates are at their bottom, is then printing money and pumping money into the economy. And that's what we're talking about with quantitative easing. So we're easing the quantity of money in the economy, effectively.
Yep.
And that's what they did. So they started printing money and buying up government bonds, and the money made its way into the economy via the public sector. So that's what quantitative easing was. And they've been doing that at a pace of $5 billion every week. Wow. So printing $5 billion worth of fresh money and pumping it into the economy.
Just sticking it in the economy. I'm still yet to see any of it. Just putting that out there in case anyone from the RBA is listening. I don't know if they send direct to households. Just saying, if you're pumping $5 billion a week, who's going to notice? Just, a couple of hundy here and there. Podcasts aren't cheap. They don't run themselves. I'm just saying, putting it out there. Glenn, if you're listening.
No, well, it was Glenn. It's Phil now.
Oh. Well, there goes my money.
Yeah, he hates you now. He's off you. Yeah, so they're doing this and they want to get the economy pumping along.
Yep.
And they came out last week and said, at the last board meeting, and said, things are tracking pretty well. We're going to taper back. So taper is the term. So you're going to hear this more and more. And we're tapering back how much money we're pumping into the economy. And as I said, $5 billion seems like it's a bit much. We're going to wind it back to $4 billion.
Oh, it's a lot of money to any normal person, but...
and it's still a lot of money. Like, you go back 18 months and say that the RBA was going to be printing $4 billion a week and pumping into the economy. Like, no one would have believed you.
Right.
But this is where we're at right now.
I was going to say, it's obviously working. Like, they're still doing it. They haven't sort of turned off the tap.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, Phil is saying we're on track in the statement, saying like we're on track, we're happy with how things are going, but we still want to see, we still need to see inflation print in the target band. For that to happen, we need to get wages up. Wages growth going between 3% and 4%. They're currently like 1%, 1.1. So still a way off that. And for wages growth to happen, we need to get unemployment down and keep it down. At least somewhere in the mid 4s probably is the sort of mark for that. But so that's the shift. The other thing is that they've moved to a state dependent program. So previously it was just running until November. They're saying we're going to print $5 billion a month in November and then it's going to stop. So now they're saying we're winding it back to 4, but we're not putting an end date on it now.
I love it. I read the quote. It said, we updated our QE3 forecast to a flexible, open-ended and state-dependent program. Thomas, is that just RBA speak for we're pretty much just winging it from here on out?
Yeah, exactly. It's really just saying we're just going to do this and see how it goes. That's Econo speak for just going to see how it goes.
I mean, that's how I run my household budget. I have done for many years.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like this is more important than that.
State-dependent.
Well...
Sorry, babe. The holiday's state dependent.
What does that even mean, state dependent?
Well, they're waiting for the right states, so the right numbers in the economy. So it means that for inflation to be back in the target band.
Right. So it's not if New South Wales does particularly well and South Australia sucks.
State of origin. No. Yeah, no. They're wanting to see actual results. So the interesting thing, Chris Joy noted this in the AFR, saying like, people are talking about it being a tapering. People are talking about winding back the massive spending program, something like $270 billion so far, like a huge amount of money. And people are talking about the RBA slowly winding it back. But because it's now open-ended, we could actually end up with a much bigger total print over the life cycle of the QE program that they're running, just at a slower pace week to week. But it could actually end up being much larger because it now just runs...
It's a blank check.
Check.
Yeah, we'll just keep printing forever. We're not going to haven't put a date on it.
Yeah, pretty much.
What does it mean for? Does it have any sort of bigger impacts on? I don't know, things like currency or.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of one of the main reasons that they're doing this is that everyone else is doing it as well. And if the RBA is not, while the Fed and all the other central banks are printing, then the Aussie dollar appreciates pretty rapidly. And so they're kind of a little bit in an arms race. They've got to keep printing so long as the rest of the world is printing, because whoever stops first will see their currency appreciate, and that sort of hurts your domestic economy. So they're a bit stuck with that until the rest of the world slows down the money printers as well. Yeah, but it means money's super cheap for longer. Yeah, the Australian government's got, a blank check to do whatever it wants in terms of spending. So, because they're buying government bonds. So that's the transmission mechanism. It comes through Canberra, comes through fiscal spending. Yeah, so more of that. Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the implications of that before, but probably good for infrastructure plays.
Like buying an airport.
Yeah, for example.
All right, we'll tell you what, we might pause there. We'll go have a quick break, get a word from our sponsors, and be right back after these messages. Welcome back. You're on Comedian versus Economist. Don't forget you can always send us an email, cve@equitymates.com, or head over to the website, equitymates.com/CVE. We very much like hearing from you. So send us an email or check out the socials, as we say, CVE Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. But Thomas, now we're going to head over to China, and some big news this week. And in fact, since February, there is an ETF called Invesco Golden Dragon China ETF, which sounds a lot like a poker machine, to be honest. I'm not surprised if I'm walking into the casino and I'm seeing a poker machine called the Golden Dragon. The Golden Dragon China ETF is dropped 10% this week. It's 30% down since February. And my understanding is that China is trying to crack down on Chinese companies, big tech firms in particular, listing in the United States. You know what's going on there?
Yeah, exactly that. So that Golden Dragon ETF is for Chinese companies that are listed in the American market.
Right.
Yeah, and that's copped the wallop this week because China announced that it was going to start investigating a bunch of Chinese firms that were listed in America, and signaled that they were taking a bit of a dim view on that, or they were concerned about that listing and what that means. And I think it's kind of reasonable. My take on it, I think China, I think it's right. Once you sort of list in a foreign country and you raise capital in that country, then you become subject to the laws and regulations of that country to an extent. And I think China is worried about what that might mean in terms of the ability for the US government to leverage some power over the Chinese companies and open up some strategic weaknesses over the Chinese government.
Yeah, right. So it's is it the Chinese government sort of worried about losing control to a large extent? Is it about the influence that they can have over the companies if they start listing in foreign countries, then they lose that kind of oversight, that ability to manage the companies? Or
my sense is that it's more about data and about opening up windows into the Chinese companies and then into the Chinese state through the Chinese companies, more so than about control of the companies themselves. I think as long as they're Chinese companies, then China will have enough control over the companies to be happy. But I think it's about opening a window for the US government to come at China through these Chinese companies. And I think you remember back to when Donald Trump banned TikTok, or said that TikTok had to he wanted TikTok to sell to an American company if it wanted to keep operating in the country. And the argument there was that TikTok was collecting all this data, was really a data hungry platform. And then the Chinese government, through their control of the TikTok company, had access to all that data, all that American data and all that demographic data. And I think the American government was worried about that, saw that as a strategic weakness.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit hypocritical, isn't it? I mean, the Facebooks of the world, they've got everyone's data. So it's okay if they've got all your data, but it's not okay if a Chinese company has the data?
That's exactly it, because, we're moving to this era of strategic rivalry. So we were friends before. America and China were friends before, but the relationship was warming. They were seen as economic partners in a lot of things. That's now moving to a doctrine of strategic rivalry. And then it does matter who's got access to your data and all the population data and what you might use with that, what you could use that data for. So I think, it is really a question of which government ultimately has control. And I think the US is saying, we're happy because we're happy with Facebook collecting the data. There might be issues with that, but at least we've got some leverage over Facebook because it's an American company. Yeah, and I think that China's come in the same way, saying like, we're not happy with Facebook coming and collecting all our Chinese citizen data because we don't have control over Facebook.
Interesting. So the governments are fighting with each other. It's not so much a question of the companies themselves. It's more about the governments trying to maintain control of their citizens' data that's being released to private companies. I think something else. Did I read? Because Jack Ma, who's the head of Alibaba, and he's the guy that went missing for a while. He just disappeared off the face of the planet. No one knew where he was. He's a billionaire. And it's like no one knows where Jack's gone. But I think, did I read somewhere that they were sort of saying, we're worried about the amount of power that some of these guys have got now if they list, they run their companies overseas, they have all this power. And then he started making noises backwards against the Chinese government, and they didn't sort of like that either.
Yeah, it's an interesting dance China's got with the capitalist class in a way. And like, I think one of the criticisms that often leveled at the US is that the corporations have too much power and ability to influence politics through donations and, influencing the political system. And I think so. China, I think, would be looking at that and going like, well, that's not a situation we want to see develop in China, and so we do need to keep a lid on that. But I don't know. That's my personal spin on it. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about that particular angle, but I would be surprised if they weren't worried about it.
Yeah, interesting. Moving on to finish with Iceland, and ever since I paid out the Nordic countries, they've appeared just doing amazing things week after week. And this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. So Iceland have trialled a 4-day work week. Believe it or not, Thomas, employees loved it. Loved the idea. Thought it was fantastic. Yeah, who would have figured?
They didn't want to work more.
Yeah. But no, apparently the government, they tried a range of professions and they moved from the 40-hour... This is the bit that confuses me. All the headlines say they went to a 4-day work week. But then you go into the detail and it says they've moved from a 40-hour work week to a 35 or 36-hour work week. So I don't know whether they're working more in each day. Anyway, apparently they did a 4-day work week and it's amazing. I did wonder, though, what that would mean if we were to trial that in Australia. Like, does that mean are people free on Fridays? It would be good? Doing overtime on Fridays, going out for long lunches at time and a half. That'd be...
Claim overtime for Fridays. Yeah, right.
Do you reckon that could ever work here?
Oh, I think it could work anywhere. I mean, it's worth remembering that we've been we're constantly trying to dial back the work week. Like the idea of a 5-day work week was once seen as a bit radical. Having both Saturday and Sunday off was a radical idea. Having a 40-hour work week where it was just like everyone just worked 40 hours was a radical idea at some point. Yeah, we've been trying to sort of keep a lid on that. And there's a few sort of reasons for that. One, it's sort of a lifestyle thing. It's
a pretty radical idea for most people finishing uni, I reckon. It's like, or school, coming out of school or uni, just going, what? 40 hours every week?
For the rest of my life?
For the rest of my life? Are you serious? I start at when?
AM?
It's ridiculous.
I mean, it works. There's a sort of a competitive arms race element in it. So partly it's about sort of the story is it's like, it's the evil employers who want everyone to work really long hours, and we've got to push back against that. And that's part of the story, but it's just as much a part of the story as we kind of need to de-escalate the arms race as people working, because if you're in a group and everyone's working 40 hours and then one guy starts working 50 or 60 hours, that guy suddenly gets a lot of economic advantages. He's got more money, he can do more stuff, and you're like, I need to start working 50 hours too. And then suddenly you sort of create this sort of arms race where everyone just to sort of feels like to get ahead they need to work longer hours, but then that becomes the norm and everyone's just working longer hours and you're exactly where you were. So sort of an idea, if you can sort of somehow convince everyone at the same time to work less, you can de-escalate that arms race and you can work less and not suffer economically. Like at the moment, if I was to go from my 22-hour work week down to a 16-hour work week, I get less money. But like working less means less money for me, which means that I've got less economic power in the economy we've got, and so I've got to accept the consequences of that. But if everyone steps down their work week, then there's no loss of economic power, and I've freed up a whole bunch of free time. And so this is sort of an idea, of course, the Nordic countries are into this. They're all about lifestyle and happiness and all that sort of business. Yeah, but they're trying to create an experiment where the government leads the way and helps that de-escalation happen and winds people down. And there's kind of there's kind of a need to it too, because we're a bit labor abundant. Like with automation's kicking in, people are worried about there being enough jobs for people in the AI, in the robot age. So if we can sort of find ways for everyone to work less, that's a good thing. Take Granddad, for example, take Grandpa Kylie. So between him and us, like the technological leaps and the advances that have happened in that 100 years has been mammoth. And yet we are working as many hours as he was, if not more.
Pretty hard worker though. I'm not sure I'm working as much as he did.
Yeah, he did real work. Not this business.
Yeah.
But so all of that technological advancement, 100 years ago, people were worried about, once we saw where the Industrial Revolution was going, people are worried, well, what is it? What's everyone going to do? We're going to run out of things for people to do. We're going to have so much leisure time. We're not going to know what to do with ourselves. But we don't have so much leisure. We don't have any more leisure time than our grandparents did. And because it's sort of all gone into this sort of arms race concept.
Yeah, I remember growing up, and Mum would go to the post office, she'd go to the bank, she'd go to all these places. I cannot fathom when she did that. I just imagine my life now if I also had to go to the bank and I had to go to the post office and I had to go somewhere to pay a bill. It's all moved online, it's all internet banking, it's all everything.
Yeah, stand in queue to pay your electricity. Can you imagine?
Yeah. What's replaced that? Are we more productive? Is that what it is? Are we just sort of working more and that people are no one's ever accused me of being too productive, I don't think. But I think Iceland said that one of the things that they did, they tried to get more efficient about their work. They stopped having so many meetings and tried to just get things done via chat or email, which I don't know that that's ever been more efficient for anyone either, having a Teams chat rather than a meeting. I'm not sure that's particularly efficient. Some people treat meetings like it's a massage booking or something. They're like, well, I've paid for the hour. We're going to have this. I've booked an hour for the meeting. We're going to have an hour, damn it.
Biscuits are ordered.
Yeah. It's we're finished. It took 20 minutes. We can all just go back and keep working. No, we've got the hour. We might as well find some other things to talk about. There's an element of that. But presumably it all has to be driven, as you say, by the government. So, because that probably keys off. If the government says, all right, every government worker now is going to do 4 days a week, then that puts pressure on every other private industry.
Yeah, that's right. That's typically, I think France was experimenting with this a while ago. Yeah. It's the only way to sort of get some sort of collective action, particularly, now union membership's down to something like 10%. So it's not, unions don't have enough leverage to be able to drive it anymore, I don't think.
So where does it come from? Just, we go to march. How do we get this up? How do we get? What do we do? Take it to the streets?
Well, it's a classic prisoner's dilemma. This is an idea in game theory. It's a prisoner's dilemma, but it's there's an incentive to cheat. So if everyone says, we put out a call, everyone says, okay, we're going to work 30 hours a week. Everyone's like, great, we're all on board. And then you're like, hang on, if I work 40 hours a week, I'm going to have more money than everyone else. Do you know what I mean? So there's an incentive to cheat, and then in the absence of some kind of controls, then you have cheaters, and then you end up back at 40 hours a week.
Right. I don't know how the employers are going to take it either if everyone just suddenly woke up tomorrow and said we're going to work 30 hours a week. I think a lot of people might be out of work for more than 30 hours a week. Interesting. All right. Well, fingers crossed for a 4-day working week. That'll be good. If you do want to get on board, send us an email, cve@equitymates.com or equitymates.com/CVE. Let's start a movement. All right, that does us for this week on Comedian vs. Economist. We do thank you very much for listening, tuning in, and we look forward to talking to you again next week. See you then.
Comedian vs. Economist is a product of Equity Mates Media. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of Comedian vs. Economist are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the Equity Mates website, where you can find ASIC resources and find a registered financial professional near you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media and the hosts of Comedian vs. Economist acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.